Today, we're diving into a story that has it all: incredible wealth, a deep, dark mystery, and a courtroom battle that absolutely captivated the world. But this is more than just a true crime story. It's really about the American justice system itself and its search for truth among the super rich. Let's get into it. So, picture this: a massive, opulent mansion in Newport called Clarendon Court. This is the world of Martha Sonny von Bülow, an heiress to a staggering fortune. I mean, it's a world of unbelievable privilege. But as we're about to see, all that money can't protect you from tragedy. In fact, it might have been the very thing that brought it right to her door. Then, in December of 1980, the unthinkable happens. Sonny von Bülow is found unconscious on her bathroom floor, and she would never, ever wake up. She spent the next 28 years in what doctors call a persistent vegetative state. Her silence? Well, that becomes the central mystery of this entire saga. And that, of course, led to the one explosive question that kicked off one of the most sensational trials of the 20th century. Did her husband, the aristocratic Claus von Bülow, try to murder her? Was it all to get his hands on that fortune and be free to be with his mistress? So how does a terrible family tragedy turn into a full-blown criminal indictment? Well, it all started with a series of really alarming events that quickly turned suspicion into a formal accusation. Let's just walk through the timeline for a second. In 1979, Sonny falls into her first coma. It was temporary, and doctors just chalked it up to low blood sugar. But a year later, the second coma hits, and this time it's permanent. Sonny's kids from her first marriage were convinced this was no accident. So they launched their own investigation, and what they find in a locked closet turns this whole case on its head. A black bag, and inside, a syringe with traces of insulin. By 1982, Claus was on trial for his life. And right there, you see the two powerful, completely opposite stories that are about to collide in court. On one hand, the family sees a cold-blooded plot for money and freedom. But on the other hand, Claus's defense team paints a picture of a troubled woman who tragically caused her own downfall through a long history of substance abuse. So in that first trial, the prosecutors felt like they had this thing in the bag. They believed they'd built what they called a circumstantial fortress, a case so tightly woven together that there was no way a jury could see anything other than guilt. The prosecution's case really stood on three main pillars. First, you've got the classic motive: money and a mistress. A divorce would have left Claus with next to nothing. Second, a really emotional witness: Sonny's fiercely loyal maid. And third, the smoking gun, that insulin-laced syringe. Now, to prove that motive, the prosecution put Claus's mistress, Alexandra Isles, on the stand. And her testimony was absolutely chilling. She told the jury that Claus described his marriage as a trap and that the only way out was through a very narrow door. The implication was just crystal clear and totally devastating. But the real heart of the prosecution's case, the emotional core, was Maria Schrahlhammer, Sonny's maid of 23 years. Her testimony was just so powerful. She claimed that she found Sonny unconscious, begged Claus to call a doctor, but he just refused. He told her his wife was just drunk and to let her sleep it off. He just sat there and waited. And then came the scientific dagger. Experts testified that the stuff found on the needle was something called exogenous insulin. Basically, it's manufactured, not the kind your body makes. Now remember, Sonny was hypoglycemic, so her blood sugar was already low. An insulin shot could easily be fatal. And there was absolutely no medical reason for it to be in their house. And the jury? They were completely convinced. They found Claus von Bülow guilty on both counts of attempted murder. The sentence was 30 years in prison. And for most people watching, that seemed like the end of the story. But it wasn't. Not even close. Claus hired a brand new, high-powered legal team for his appeal, led by the famous Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz. And their goal wasn't to prove Claus was a good guy. No, their goal was to build what they called an architecture of doubt, to just systematically take the prosecution's case apart, piece by piece. So the big question is, how did they do it? How did a case that seemed so absolutely airtight just completely fall apart and lead to a total reversal? Okay, so here's their three-pronged attack. First, they went after the maid's testimony, showing that her memory of seeing insulin somehow only popped up after the lab results were all over the news. Second, they argued the syringe itself should never have been allowed in court, since it was found during an illegal search. And third, they brought in their own army of experts.
And this, right here, was the cornerstone of their new defense. They brought in 8 different medical experts who all testified that, hey, you don't need an injection to explain this coma. They argued that a mix of barbiturates, alcohol, and Sonny's own chronic health problems was more than enough to cause this tragic outcome. See, they didn't have to prove it happened that way, they just had to prove it could have.
And you know what? It worked. After the second trial, the jury came back with a verdict that was just stunningly different. Not guilty on all counts. Klaus von Bülow, the man once sentenced to 30 years, was now a free man. So we're left with this crazy situation. 2 trials using the exact same evidence that produced 2 completely opposite verdicts. And this really forces us to look at the huge gap between what happens in a courtroom and what the absolute truth might be. You know, the play that this whole explainer is based on puts it perfectly. The real question isn't just about whether Klaus did it. It's about whether our legal system, or any legal system, can actually find the truth when you've got factors like immense wealth, social class, and all this intense emotion swirling around. In the end, Sonny von Bülow remained silent for 28 long years. The law gave us one answer, and then it gave us another, completely different one. But the truth of what really happened in that Newport mansion on that cold December night, well, that remains a haunting, unresolved question.